So 다게 추주른 예배 소남제 브라라 벤제 산제 조바라 쇼 산제 조라 조제 조남라 장조 바도 나네 장조제 다게 추주른 예배 소남제 브라라 벤제 산제 조바라 쇼 산제 조라 조제 조남라 장조 바도 나네 장조제 다게 추주른 예배 소남제 로라 벤제 산제 조바쇼 강제 도배 예선에 다와단제 벤베제라 담베스네 동베베 고다만데 알라 차데로 고다만데 알라 차데로 남데로 강제되는 예선에 다와단제 벤베제라 담베스네 동 고다만데 알라 차데로 송네 다와단제 방메 와다 통절라는 매바 양답으로 저배 산지지 컴포너 보지 진해장 토벌 자스 대토벌 자위 철 아니 자위성으로 군지 내 뛰어봐 전주 남지 산주 남지 좀 몰래 버스 대냠배 Let
us cultivate bodhicitta motivation or the altruistic motivation seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim teaching on stages of path leading to complete enlightenment.
아니 투모 마인바다 제주 전부 예시 타고 체한도 저기 예시 타고 대난된 게 달롱디 투모 마인베 개념목 남자 거디스
So we're back to volume number 3 in the English translation of Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stages of the path enlightenment. And we are on page 209. And as you may recall, that we laid out some important outlines some time ago. And the more recent one that we talked about is, if you will, unique perspective of Prasangika Madhyamika. And sometimes we can talk about 8 what called unique features of Prasangika Madhyamika perspective or system, and in light of that, we talked a bit about Prasangika's unique understanding of afflictive emotions or delusions.
타고 시라를 레샤 대대 하고 한다지 쇼리 때 한마을 다 가라왔다 지하세 아마 남바도 챙기러 다티네 마 어제나 엔디송도 다티네 마 참자한다지 가득제라 로봉지 어메 땡주 가장거를 바 진이지 송바 탐제 님베 때목이 추어남라랑게 뭐 도브라 또다고 라신 택가네 추어남게 라신 오니 메버 톰반데바 임베스 스메르다 가르쳐기야라 때목 다틴데 로봉기 애니피게 루두기 사실 소비 값수 애니피게지 가장곡을 봐. 다 동리 되베를 봤잖아. 가장곡 동리 봐 되베를 다 티젠 선다를 베트남랑 타이를 거네 마. 송요아래 진이세야 돼 타이번 접지라 다 자가지라. 가장곡을 봐 진이 송바 탐지 소르부터 가리스나 가자 가린 거고요래. 단도 뒤값 해야 강자대 가린 거고요래잖아. 때목진 지와레스. 맞아 줄 때목 머리 단디 머리 붙잖아다 때목지 그래서 다데 대송도한테 때목이 쇼남나란 게 뭐, 얘네 줘봐. 좋다 다데 망고 휴타르바다. 이제 막 개미도 와들. 때목이 쇼남지란 게 뭐, 얘는 비게 요바 마임발 요바를 좋다네. 좋다스들도 요바 마임발 요바를 좋다네. 라젠지 얘네 가르쳐왔다. 좋다네. 좋다네. 좋다고 얘네 라젠테 깍버리. 각자까지 좀 가르쳤잖아. 때목이 뒤에 라젠지 줘봐. 템페게 점바티 신유디 까게 와래 세리 어디 대승도가 까네스 대박간 가르치기면서는 쇼남제랑은 원이 매바 똥바는 대바에 대간 똥이선이 똥그래 다 똥이선에다 가르쳐네 다시 해보지라다 다시 망보여 알아봐 쇼남제 원이 매바거라 대박간이 쇼님 원이 매바 똥이선이도 주 안에 가서다 두버레체네 승부에 따라봐 lost that then
So we are on page 209, the last bottom paragraph. And as Khensur Rinpoche has explained, that great Indian master Arya Nagarjuna, in his many treatises, such as the fundamental treatise of Mula Madhyamik, provides us numerous reasonings or evidence to be able to refute what we call the object of negation or object of refutation, in Tibetan called gakcha, what needs to be refuted or what needs to be negated. And that's being done based upon a variety of rationality or reasonings. And so what exactly are we refuting, if you ask? So we talked about this quite a bit before also, that what is really negated or refuted is what we call intrinsic reality, or something that exists in and of itself. Does that kind of reality exist in actuality? The answer is no. But we fabricate such a reality and we grasp at it. So that's what we call avidya or ignorance or marikpa. Yeah? All of us have the ignorance of grasping at intrinsic reality. And so this grasping is really grounded in a fabrication we call Trotava, because we created a reality, it is not there. Okay? So when something is not there and we say it exists, well, that's how we go crazy. Well, he didn't say that, but that's what it is. So what is that we really fabricate and create? We just cook it all up. It's the intrinsic nature of things, intrinsic reality. And that is what we also called technically the referent object of grasping at self, in Tibetan called shenyo. Right? That is the reference point, or that's the referent object of grasping at self. So by employing a variety of reasonings, we establish that such a reality does not exist. So by refuting intrinsic reality, what do we establish is the emptiness of intrinsic reality. So that's what we call emptiness or shunyata or sunnata in Pali. Okay? So by refuting intrinsic reality, we assert the absence of intrinsic reality, which is, in other words, emptiness. No.
Oh yeah, that tangi tul di kagi sin husar wata. When you never tomba deva is country is ana. Kadang rabu de country kagi is an tanti sung doa. Tanga to marip sia lo marip singing tanga to jula. Hengi to you dig we are takunda the hengi new the you dig your ba. Marikpa din tinda any pig swing chong. Konya tondu ripanna sopa sung by imbar. Marikpati chik seating at Sarang Rabuchi Kevaruchi video Mariko. 시방 겐다르 지리들다 머릭바 생이 되더니 예다 미팅초 르바 히랍디야 찌네 아니 머릭바 생이 되게 진당데 코나징 진도 여러분 좋다 아니 나란돌 나란도 매버지 안진 좋다 진도 여러분 군익 진당님보다 딱딱 순춘네 그게 제 코네 돈도 되는 그게 제 가르쳐다 동인이라고 제가 두지에 그랬나 소바지 송바리스네 어디 송이도 간데 마르벤된다 순춘으로 코네 돈도 그랬나 소바 송배 인베스 어디 인바르스 송도가 어디 송으로.
So all of us have in our mind what we call ignorance or marigba, avidya. And as we have talked about this another day, that our ignorance can take two forms, if you will. There's the intellectual form, intellectually formed grasping, and then we have innately developed grasping. So the kind of ignorance that we're talking about right now is not intellectual, but that is innately developed, exists within our mind. And it is important for us to understand how our ignorant mind really perceives phenomena or things to exist. And how do we perceive things to exist? And so when we look at what we call the modes of apprehension of phenomena by our ignorant grasping, what we see or understand is that we see as if things exist intrinsically in and of themselves. Okay? That's how we project certain reality onto phenomena. It is not there, and then we believe in our own fabrication and perception. Okay? Now, in order to eradicate or to counteract that kind of ignorance, we have to cultivate its antithesis, which is the wisdom. Okay? It's by way of cultivating wisdom and understanding how things actually exist, not how we think it exists or we make it all up, but how do they really exist, right? By introducing ourselves to the ultimate mode of existence of phenomena, and as we develop that knowledge and cultivate that wisdom, then we can counteract our basic fundamental ignorance. That is the only way. Okay? In the external world, when it's too hot, we can put the air conditioning on so it can balance out. Or if it's too cold, put the heater on, right? So the heat and cold are antitheses of each other. But when we think in terms of the internal world, how the perceptions work, is not exactly the same thing. Okay? The only way we can counteract our ignorance is by way of cultivating its antithesis, which is another state of mind, if you will, called wisdom or jnana, right? And so that's what we need to do. No.
유방한테 리케님 본 것도 발라. 그리바자다 기는 주변 대신에 마송게와 오다 대다 초듀리. 단 더르티나 롱데니 뭐 투모 많이 받지 지 인피에 희야데 수수 희리어 투모 많이 비 남자한테 간데스리스네 방공 파발로도게 희브리스 가지 슈타라 왔다지 희브리스 대점 좀 맞대 아니 파발라 희야비 값이야 되니 그랬지 희브리스 근데 다와 특别희브리스 다가 나시게 아니 산제 장게 희브리 공부 기발해 희브리스简单데 산제 장게 롱데 동의고도 와데 희바디 근데 희바디 그는 보다 빨리 된데 봐신데 니네 동의고도 와 어디 송거야다 나 가르 송거야라서는 디 희바 임바디 가르서는 보다 빨리 달래 센도데 보다 빨리 갈래 가르 송거야라서는 떼진 데랑 정화 지속된 발로 고바째 있잖아 힙 있잖아 세라봐 다디 티와크 소리세 다디 고카부를 샤기들 남았다도 고카부 말랑랑 올라 다 지담에 뒤다디 오체산디 가르치기라선 다디 티와티엘라 땡진 데버런 좀 제수던 바 고바 가리어라 신티기도 다 제수던 바 세야지 당원도 던 바 세야지 제수던 바 있는 원도 던 바지 요구를 받다 디 가르치게 땡데스니 다 저기 도마 마송유도 정디되기 맛다 땡데스니다 동반이기 텐데테 송구요아리라 뒤제기 텐데 또 저버디다 마르고 온기 되는 비긴 뒤지기래 사야기 텐데 되는마 양라 중에 마 땡용고요 봐 텐데 레디 얘는 따티 지 텐데 저버지 지인저지마도 테코나니기 텐데데 믹스칸이 해봐 마임바지 당을에 추준 제기요다 이 인디메디 제지 공부되지마도 데 테버레스네 제야요 말로 소스 공부제 누구도 되러 예 이제 마시도 해기였다 제단티 지 텐데 저버지 관계 땡진 저번 용 이제 마시인데 텐데 지신 저버지 마시요레스 아니 단단 공부로도 기대시를 따히를 속에 값수 아니 테코나니 텐데티 지 텐데 해봐 마세 테코나니 텐데데 지 로즈 땅에 마 제산이 티셰용 티쇼가 티스타디 쇼세야 티 고야다 텐데 시기도 같이 될라가리 고바 카리 와라 티 텐데 ཉ 텐데 직 송산다 주제도 맞죠 정도 텐데 다다 뒤에 값서 동이 텐데 잡지 마 송고야 고바 카리 와라 다 도도 전에 저와티 당게도스
No. As I mentioned this the other day, that the unique perspective of Prasangika on understanding afflictive emotions or delusions and emptiness, it has been kind of propounded by a number of great Prasangika scholars, if you will, starting with Arya Nagarjuna. Okay? And so we have seen quotations from Arya Nagarjuna's works, such as Fundamental Treatise, if you will, or such as 70 Stanzas of Emptiness that we saw before. Okay? And then also one of the main disciples of Arya Nagarjuna is Arya Dev. So we have also seen how Arya Dev also follows that unique perspective and talks about it in his works, such as 400 stanzas on the middle way or Chatuk Shedak, Shibjaba in Tibetan. Okay? And then also I mentioned before that Chandrakirti also really follows the same unique perspective, and he talks about it in his works, especially Supplement to the Middle Way or Madhyamik Avatar. Right? And then the great Bodhisattva Mahasattva Shantideva talks about the same perspective in his works, especially as we mentioned before, the 9th chapter of Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Bodhisattva Char Avatar. Okay? And now, here comes the Buddha Palita, another great master, right? So in his work called Commentary on Buddha Palita, right, then he also, furthers, if you will, the same unique perspective of Nagarjuna. And that's what you see at the bottom of page 209. And so in this commentary of Buddha Palita, he raises a question, which is on page 210, right on the top. What is the purpose of teaching dependent arising? Right, a question has been raised. What is the reason or the purpose of teaching dependent arising? Okay. Now, as Khensur Rinpoche says, a dependent arising or pratit samudpad is such a, core idea or concept in Buddhism that it could be explained in many different ways. Okay? And that's why many great masters have written so many works to illustrate that very idea or the concept. And of course, he says, maybe for some of you it may be not that difficult to understand, but for him, this is a very difficult concept, and he can only do his best to explain the way he understands it. But there may be other ways of understanding what dependent arising is. And so the way it is in Tibetan, it seems like, is what's the purpose of this subsequent presentation of dependent arising? Not just simply say what's the purpose of teaching dependent arising. It says what is the purpose of this what we call subsequent presentation of dependent arising. So when we say subsequent, there has to be precedence, isn't it? Something has to go before. Otherwise, what is subsequent? And so that's why Chesutemba is the Tibetan word, something that comes afterwards. And as Khensur Rinpoche explained, that when we look at the Buddha's teachings overall, we could have a generic understanding of what dependent arising is, but it's samutpat or tenta. Okay? And in most cases, when Buddha talked about dependent arising, really he talked about it in terms of what we call functional things or products or produced phenomena, as we call it, duje, right? It talks about dependent arising mostly in regards to or in terms of produced phenomena or composite phenomena, products. Yeah. But there is also explanation of dependent arising in terms of suchness or thatness or emptiness. Okay, and so Khensur Rinpoche thinks that when this question is raised, what is the purpose of this subsequent presentation of dependent arising? This really refers to dependent arising of emptiness, if you will, or the dependent arising of ultimate nature of things. Okay. No.
어다지 디와치 단다디 디와치마 제고바지 유잖아 다 얘기 있은 것도가 해봐 시자 빼자 그러는 도가 해봐 다 가리 얘기 있잖아 아니 대승도가 고반도부터 가리 와서 세븐 TV 렌래야 아니 로본 톡지 젠스 톡지 단위 젠지 심전남 동에 나토지 녀바라 세gne 대다 남버 두버 자비 칠 ngobonamji yantakwa chetawa ni rapto tamba xebara Tenzin devaran chongwa jesu tamba tsamde tadi leri ta kante tsini kyabgu yosini ta kozo sheginda de tata jipige mbent masongshi ndambesa kari choyo hako marwa yinhe ta kozo ngarangi samsong kozo ndoji shebi na karisigi yarsini ta teresi 아니 피게지 고물루도 르봉세 야든 고물루도 저라와 고물루도 아니 그 가르쳐야 알았잖아 툭다와 쳐보시고 지와래 툭된 거할 놈이야 툭 마분 나긴 게 툭도 전부 저기 와래 대승도와 단위 젠지 심지어 제단 다 딘데기 그 심지어 나올라 아니 동에 나서 저 아니 피게지 예 기간 나질 속에다 때문에 나도 지금 애니피게지 예 마냥간도 보지 다 가서 갔다 마치 된데 나발 홍대 버리지 sickness that's this sickness that's 저한테 다가라지 sickness 저 쪼버도 쉬우지 제 때문에 밴도요 말아봐다 밴도 다 가르치기 인세서나 다 되게 야지 단단 마지 안도제 거기 애니피게 지시 다지 le number nazo sane ani taje or ta yu o tende signe tende yang ta bur ani toba chabi cherto 대다 뒤에 잡대 샵에 셔도 가르치기 봐 저랑게 알티야 로완남이야 아니 단다 냠탁은 송대야디 야 동야래 가르치기 요새가 있나 되는 대세노와 뭐본남지 양탁과 제다와 랍도 때문에 기베 다 뒤에 가르치고 되게 단지 티와게 쇼글 댄서야 되게 똥이 된게 똥이 그때에 됐다 댄진 되버는 종한테 때네 다 제수 때문에 쌈데스
So we are on top of page 210, where it reads, what is the purpose of teaching dependent arising? And the master Nagarjuna, whose very nature is compassion, saw that living beings are beset by various sufferings and assumed the task of teaching the reality of things just as it is, so that they might be free, unquote. Okay, so Khensur Rinpoche gives explanation on those lines. So then if asked, what is the purpose of this subsequent teaching or presentation of dependent arising? And so the response to that question is the great master Arya Nagarjuna is someone who embodies great compassion, who has infinite compassion for all sentient beings. The kind of compassion he has can only be exemplified by the kind of love and compassion that mother has for her only child. Okay? And with that compassionate mind, what he sees is that all sentient beings are in a very miserable, difficult situation where their lives are fraught with all kinds of problems and suffering, right? I mean, we can never finish talking about all types of suffering. Some of the generic sufferings that sentient beings go through are the suffering of birth, suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, and suffering of death. So we all experience those types of suffering. And then this really concerns him. He said, wow, sentient beings have so much suffering. So what can we do? What can I do, right? And he does not, take the, doing nothing as an option. He's not like, okay, I'm so depressed now. Like all of this is miserable, and okay, there's nothing I can do. But that is, failure. It doesn't help us in it, right? But as matter of fact says, what? The only way I see that I can help sentient beings is I show them the reality as it is. How do things really exist? Then that understanding and that knowledge and wisdom can really free them, liberate them from the state of suffering. So that's why, he did, in other words, this subsequent presentation of the dependent arising of emptiness comes into picture, right? Something that I left from the previous explanation is dependent arising in terms of produced phenomena. A good case, an example, is the 12 links of interdependent origination, isn't it? It starts with ignorance, okay? Then due to ignorance, we create karmic formation, all kinds of good, bad, not good, bad, all karmas are created. And then they deposit their imprints on our consciousness, and then the rest of the links follow. Okay? That's how we come into samsara. Okay? But now how can we get out of this, right? How can we break this chain? This is where, we need to talk about the dependent arising of emptiness or shunyata. So this is where Nagarjuna says, if I show sentient beings how things exist, that reality as it is, then they can free themselves from the state of suffering.
Tenzin 다 GSTDL 아니 자고 즉 덴덴저부터 당구지 산이 송바래 가이사나 다제 저런부터기 때비야 뛰어윤디 발라 간식석이 송바이 전단동 발로나미 야와 덴덴저번 중 세킨동 바철라 뛰어서와 마도 제게 동이 세킨동 바철 뒤세네 뛰어라 뛰자 푸요 말봐 제가 아니 다 깐들이 가대 레디가 레디 임베이나야 곰루도 그래서 동이기 때문에 땐데데 때도는 삼바 이세 시점 거야 주된데다 코랑게 때에 온기 이세 때에 온기 텐데 자와디 다투지 첨부 얘기된 투지 첨부 쓰기도 와 투지 첨부 그래 투지 첨부다 닌지 첨부 님부터 가리리디나 개버라 다들 자원나 봐 계세야 저부터 다 망고요 다 유시로 봐 이제 가리 현대 맨날 투지 첨부 쓰니래 투지 첨부 쓰니데 다 그러리 대자에 군랑 거야 투지 첨부도 간데서는 대신도니다 내 첨부지리 배 피버스문게 연대 탐지에게 싸웠다고 가르쳐 줘야 하잖아 투지 첨부도 차리야 인지 첨부도 차리야 저비 인자 반대 나와 특별 인비네요 제 오만조가 도마르 덤베 도마르 제실다게 도마르 년제 떠버지 될 구바요 아래스게 아래 구바주 된 첨부주 아래스 년제데 강면제게 NP게 특별스문게 연대 탐제게 싸와 NP게 사본다부지 차기 아래 양제 산주 셈퍼리 탑이나야 제 고다 강라 똑바똥아 당시 센페 제 동국이 진바선이데 따니 NP에 고다는 진바 고 강라 가리는 데 땅야 디체디 아니 니제 첨부터 대비나야 데 마수비체니 가신 대세까지 tunzolo 마수비체는 마니랑 남람마 똥는 삼삼 아데 로규시라 여다 로규 망시가 비디고 마 땅야게 된데게 제지디 아니 되게 니지야 쥐니다 니랑 남는 똥선나 란동 코나 란도 코난라버리 란 현동 세치그리 대이나 장주 선바다히 시두교 말와 란도 코난리 코난 란도 쪽 치효리 지여와 대체선에 아니 장주 선바티 냠루야 대체선 대리 많이 비치들 닝지 주야야 쥐니 바로도 개차와 출리다고 인세래 토마르 개차와 사봉이 바로도 개차와 출리니 다 인디 줄에 던져야 대세기 줘발라서 뭐버터 상계도 심비이나 양제 되잘 주고 망고비나 망고비나 야티 상제네다 라니 가르서다 상제 타르레디 이네야다 심제지에니 비 코에 내일만 내던 게 ton서 예바 터르게 예대에는 디크메로데 디만디고 성게데 소레서나 대인바레 닌지 첨부인바레 닌지 꾼일라니 때는 게 냐라 장주 선발 단 가디 저게 든돌마 휴지 콜로 콜 드비 탑 휴지 콜로 엔디 트비지 주미체도 거고 여러 왔다 주미체도 버리 거도 고고 여르티 다 관계가도 라렌 투기어 말와 라게요 말봐 데 고고 여르 제단 드렉 전에 될때 닌지 첨부 때 가르쳐 버렸잖아 가면 되게 따지 건도 휴번한 신기 따 전부지 레샤스 아틴데 시아바 망고 여러 다 땡주 더 땡주 가서 갈래 시아바 여러 봐 가서 장골라메 튕기 가자 장골라메 튕기 장골라메 튕기 렉톤이 신도 세베 삼베 다기 시에 봐 장골라메 튕기 렉톤이 신도 세베 세데 자와 징도와 다들 망고 여러 망고 이게 장골라메 가서 튕기 신도 세베 삼베 다기 시에 세게 자와도 직 통기도 와 아니 와 다들 만남데 나한테 발라 여름이게 가서 그랬다 가서 투지첨부터 어다다 유효 어딘데 진짜 자와디 자와 닌지 첨부스니데 신도 내자 아니다 통다 파좀 개차와 직 공고도
So in terms of teaching on dependent arising, we may be able to think it in two ways. One is, kind of teaching on the generic, what called notion or the idea of dependent arising, and then a particular or special presentation teaching on the dependent arising of emptiness or shunyata. Okay. And as we have seen earlier, that Arya Nagarjuna, has so much compassion for sentient beings, and in order to help sentient beings to be free from the suffering, then he thought he should really teach them the reality, meaning the ultimate reality as it is. Okay. And so dependent arising is a very essential core idea in Buddhism, and it has been praised in many ways. As Khensur says that, for example, Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa or Rinpoche, also in his praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, right, he praises him for really speaking about or teaching the idea or the notion of dependent arising. Okay, because it's through dependent arising we are able to access or understand what emptiness is. I mean, Lama Tsongkhapa didn't say, well, you are so good because you taught about emptiness. He didn't say that, right? Because you talked about the dependent arising, and that's just amazing thing you did. That nobody ever did that before, right? So that's how the kind of praise Lama Tsongkhapa gives to Shakyamuni Buddha. And so the commentary that Khensur Rinpoche has given right now is about the compassion, the importance of great compassion, if you will, in our spiritual pursuit and development. The Tibetan term is called Nyingji Chenpo, or Mahakaruna, or great compassion, or infinite compassion. Okay. And in Buddhist literature, there is so much, praises given to an explanation about, great compassion, cultivating. And in the case of, say, great Indian master Arya Chandrakirti, in his supplement to the Middle Way, Madhyamika Avatar, right at the beginning, he makes salutation or obeisance to the great compassion rather than to the enlightened beings. Okay, and so there's a great reason why he chose to, salute great compassion instead of saluting the Buddhas first, because the great compassion, if you will, is a source of all these other spiritually evolved beings. Okay? When we look across the three yanas or the vehicles of Buddhism, right, hearers or the Sharvaka yan, solitary realizers or the particular Buddha yan, and then Bodhisattva vehicle or the Bodhisattva yan, across the board, we see the essentiality and the importance of cultivating compassionate mind. Okay, so compassion is a very important attitude that we need to cultivate. And so when you have great compassion, then you really cannot sit idly. You really feel the need to be able to do whatever you can in order to help and benefit others. So that's why great Nagarjuna, with his compassionate mind, he feel the need to propound, to elucidate the dependent rising of emptiness so that the sentient beings can understand what it is and then they can be free. Okay, free at last. No, he didn't say that, but that's what it is. As Khensur Rinpoche has explained, that compassion is considered as very important in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of our spiritual journey. Okay? Compassion is very important in the beginning. It's just like the seed to grow something. Without the seed, nothing grows, right? And in the middle, compassion is important like the moisture, the water, and the fertilizers to be able to grow things, well. Yeah. At the end, compassion is very important. It's just like the bumper crop, harvest. Now you can enjoy it, isn't it? Yeah. So across our spiritual development stages, we can see how compassion is so crucial and important for us to cultivate. And of course, there are different forms of compassion. The one we emphasize more is cultivating great compassion or mahakaruna, nyingji chenpo. Okay, that's the kind of compassion bodhisattvas cultivate. Okay, and so long as they're able to nurture that great compassion, right, then they are able to stay on track to achieve complete enlightened state. But somewhere, if they get disheartened and lose that great compassion, then they fall into the lower spiritual paths. Okay, and which means that now they are not on the Mahayana path, but they may be on the Shrivakayana path or the Patika Buddhayana path, where the practitioners also benefit many other beings. Okay, it's not like they're completely sorry to say it this way, but to make my point, egomaniacs or something. Yeah, I mean their primary concern is their personal liberation, nirvana. Okay, so get it, right? So that's their main concern. But at the same time, they really care about other sentient beings. So they do benefit others a lot. Just because they don't have the great compassion, so therefore they don't have the attitude to put others before self so much, isn't it? It's the self before others, really. Okay, and so that's why great compassion is really essential quality for bodhisattvas. And there are many stories how sometimes some bodhisattvas get really, I think, bogged down too much by our behaviors, and then they lose their hope, and they lose the great compassion, and then they fall into lower states. Then somebody has to pull them up, like, no, okay, I'll help you, just go up. But we don't have stories to tell. That's what Khensur Rinpoche says. And the reason why, even once you become Buddha, completely enlightened beings, now you cannot say like, hey, I achieved my goal. Now I'm going to rest and enjoy, and I'm just, not going to do anything. Why? Because the great compassion doesn't allow you to do nothing, right? Great compassion said, what? Yes, good for you. You achieved the highest goal. But now, as you promised to all sentient beings, you got to, right, help the sentient beings. So that's how the greater compassion become a motivating factor for Buddha to give discourses, to give teachings, to teach Dharma. No.
다 잠바 인승도와 딜렌치르와 다 딜만 다 잠바 인대세르와다 이대세야디 디르와디 디르와다 부베케스는 삭제스니 들어와 이대세야 세그 황만 템베 따르와다 가리세스는 디타가 참다가 책도가 되와 양다 마예 통의 징 아니 양다 통화 넘버 2 시승비체로 쓰였다 뭐본nel로 양다고 통화 마인베 아니 고안들마 친구도 송도 안돼 송도와 양다 마이 가산도 통화징 보다 양다고 마인발라 양다고 통화 간제 통담 때 받아보지 샤비나 양다고 가서 양다고 레디 양다고 마인발 양다고 통이 되잖아 고알마 친구도 송도와 돼 양다 통의 넘버 2시 딜록저도 가르잖아 다 공도 해봐 나신기 이니 가르쳐 자지 진당의 순천여 온게 양탁바라 돈담된 바라 보지 양탁바 통화 대 가르쳐잖아 고알이야 두그리스 제가 인상 아니 가서 띠텐데 동이 띠텐데 좀 시점 받대가 이세네 단 돌트는 띠송도와데 저 양탁바 제 양탁바 때 마임바 양탁바 통화 대 가르치 지레 잡을 가리어잖아 맞아 막 고안을 칭대야 지레티체 대긴 된다도 수준이 양탁바 때 동인 잡지 통선아 아야 고알이야 되베기 뭐지 뚝지네 아니 넘버 2 와다티 디에세야디 어데리 넘버 2 시스템 비처로 신 와다티 버지키나
No. So we're still on top of page 210, where we have, a quote from commentary on Buddha Palita, which reads, "Seeing what is not real, you are bound. Seeing the real, you are free." So what do these things mean? As Khensur Rinpoche has explained, seeing what is not real, meaning when we don't see how things actually exist, what is, when we don't see what is, the reality, then we are bound in samsara, in cyclic existence. And that's why, the reason why we are in samsara is because, of our grasping at intrinsic nature of things. We fabricate that reality, and then we label it onto the things or phenomena, and then we wholeheartedly believe in our own creation, right? And that's how we are stuck, because we are not seeing the reality as it is. We are seeing our fabricated reality, so we are bound in samsara. Okay. Seeing the real, meaning if we see the ultimate reality as it is, or the ultimate truth as it is, pramartha satya as it is, then we will be free. Then we really don't have to stay in samsara, because we could liberate ourselves from samsaric existence. So this is, I think, very important for us to know. That's the very reason why the dependent arising of emptiness or shunyata is being taught, for us to be free, to be able to free ourselves, isn't it? So we look at our own state of mind and see how do we project intrinsic nature or reality onto things, and then how do we perceive everything else in that mode or in that nature. Okay? That's what we call grasping at the intrinsic reality. Now, if we can untangle that, we say, things really don't exist that way. Okay? As a matter of fact, things are devoid of the intrinsic reality that we just fabricated, right? Then we see the way out. We see the exit option, from samsara.
다디 지라바 다디 템바티 지 테코나니 기텐데 휴글 땡거야 그거든 로브티라바 다디 디송도가야 티와실리기도 와다 티와실리기도 와 티와 컨딜리기 열었잖아 뭐본남지 양탁고 제타와니 가리리 다디 코토나 양때 코알이야 두퉁게 코 마도나 코 마동은 바이나 코알 마징 땡게 직 대응어부 양탁밭이야 돼 가리리 세네 지박고 버리스 아시에바 다디 티와티기 랜디 다디 희egi 있어요래 희egi 있어요다 뭐번놈지 양탁고 제타와니 간이 될 티와티라와 해바 바제 다디를 목해 믿어가 ngo니 매바 니데 다 란셰지 드베 ngo니 매발라 란셰지 드베 ngo니도 따와티 덴디체 다디 란시 덴디 ngo니 란시 드베 ngo니 매바 타가라 디깍 각박다 맹가지 여러봐 대가라한테 아니 두게 토나 코알레 두톱 공도 해버나 이게 두통게게 ngo니 대인세네 아니 렌 좀바나샤스
So in the text, those of you can follow the text on page 210, where it reads, "What is the reality of things just as it is? It is the absence of essence." Okay. So now, they say, you talk so much about, if you see that reality, then you will be free. Now, what is that? You're talking too much about, seeing the reality, then you will be free. What is that? Tell me. Okay. And so the answer to that is, it is the absence of intrinsic essence or intrinsic nature. Okay? As we have talked about this, quite a bit, that in our mind, we create this intrinsic reality and we project it onto everything that we experience. Okay? But that reality does not exist. Okay? But yet we perceive everything in terms of that reality. Okay? And the absence of that intrinsic nature that we created is what that reality is that frees you from samsara. Okay? Just to get a little more technical about that, so that absence of intrinsic reality is what we call non-affirmative negative phenomenon. Okay? If you just simply understand the absence of things, there's nothing you are asserting in its absence. That very absence itself, absence of intrinsic reality, is the ultimate nature of things. Okay? That's called non-affirmative, negative phenomenon, or mega in Tibetan.
What I did, that don't know the theory, so Karsa, Tong, Koyak, Tonji to the teacher. I think some that is sung the way, Moni Mebates. Tango Ranchi Tuba, any PhD. Ranchi Tuba, Moni Meba, like Mikebata, Manto Momba, Mimomba, Tenepi, Katizuk, Mikeba said to us. And my Hijaji Huinda, Mikeba, any Temuki, any Mumbai. Mikeba Temuki Mumbai, Tatun, which Ranchi to Matu, Chavata, Michuke, Titol, Timeseke, Moni Meba, TJ, Missing that in the Mikeba, the dead Yorota. Mikeba Temuki, any Karchera, Temukura Mikeba is you are Tinzuki, Langdornella, Mikeba, any Mikeba, Temuki on then around to get in Luduki make dimness. The Tibetans gave a chief Tabuchi, Kaza, Tabingola, America, Temuminti, Mainseati, Tangazuki, Tekonani Ton, Tibetchi, and Hutara Bakasi. What dinner he Luduki make Tibani? Any Mobonum Langoni to number Topa, Tedalas, Rajic to Bantino, Ranging over Ranging over to the Tenzin, Dubala, and Caricea or Satana, Tunzoga, say, you don't want a sure let me be, Dujai tea. To the tent of Chinny Cheonge, Yating Town, Caracata, Yidumawe, sure of China, Hidaya tea, Cheonge. That a tea, and it can be Hitabi Kazi long tabanani, Lulu Longachi to Temokulani to Tessenimo, Tanjani. Temok jump and Jerusalem, the Majumbayina, and the Jashi down soba. Egiki, Kasa, Omajuana, the Sheva, Tambunga Shitalakin, Tagin, the Shing on the Sakeba. So you sent a Rama, never in Roland Yanki. You can tell and do send that Nanjinjik, the name to Jadan, Tani, Chaju Yanga Gange, the Ketchugri, Senita, 7 years at Tendeki, Jane Cortendegi. And Rawata and Java to be Ninja Kain, but the love could do and this cutting tati, here, in that game, tati, can you tirade? Seven different number of Tedaki, Teda last, Duja, Shedan Java, Shedo, what a tipatre. That is Karasaki Gitone, Yanda Mayaton, Ching Siag, Ching looked up Tima. Yang Taba Mayimba, Trota and Ton, and they take it, Chilean of the Chinglu Kwa, Chinglu Kandira says on it, that the day in the Masungu Saraba, what in this can Chingi or Asian Sugusare.
So we have a second paragraph from the top on page 210, where you can read, unskilled persons whose eye of intelligence is obscured by the darkness of delusions conceive of an essence in things, and then generate attachment and hostility with regard to them, unquote. Yeah. So this really explains the previous line where it says, seeing what is not real, you are bound. So you say, how is that? Well, these lines explain how that works. As Khensur Rinpoche has explained in his words, that unskilled meaning, those of us who really may not necessarily pay attention to and analyze, how do things really exist? How is this intensive reality fabricated by mind? Those who are really not paying attention to that and who are really not looking into that, then they kind of remain unskilled in the sense, well, things are going to be status quo as it is, the world will go around anyway. So when we stay unskilled that way, what happens is that avidya or timuk, ignorance, it really blinds us. It obscures our intelligent mind from seeing reality as it is. So we are blinded by the ignorance. So when we are blinded by ignorance, then all other afflictive emotions such as attachment and anger, they pop up. Okay? So when we have ignorance, then what happens is when we encounter causes and conditions that give rise to attachment, like, oh, that's a beautiful person, oh, that's a beautiful thing, then like, right? And that comes up, right? Because we are obscure, right? And then because of ignorance, other conditions come up like, oh my gosh, I hate that man or whatever. He didn't say that. I hate that thing. Well, that condition come up now. I hate the hostility pop up, And this is how we stay bound in samsara, okay? And so it's important for us to understand that. As Khensur quoted many beautiful quotes from different sources. For example, he quoted great Bodhisattva Mahasattva Shantideva's quote, which we quoted some other days also from Guide to Bodhisattva Life. It says that, just like the tactile faculty, it pervades the whole body system. Okay? If something goes wrong with that faculty, then it will also affect all other systems as well. In the same way, ignorance pervades the whole system of delusions. Okay? But if we can uproot ignorance, then we can uproot all other delusions. Just like if we can somehow terminate the tactile faculty of our body, then all other system is going to fail and stop working. So just like that, if we can uproot ignorance from within our mind, then all other forms of afflictive emotions will also, be eradicated. Okay. And also, Khensur Rinpoche quoted great Indian master Chandrakirti's stanza from Supplement to the Middle Way, where many of you already know, when we stay ignorant, what happens? First there arises the conception of I. I is so important, right? I. And then there arises the conception of mind. Everything related to me is so important, my this, my that, my who, and all of that, okay? So because of this I and mind conceptions, okay, we just go round and round in samsara, round and round in samsara. That's how we go, okay? And so enlightened beings who see this kind of situation we are caught of it, they have so much compassion for it. Like, oh my gosh, look at, sentient beings, how they just make their life miserable. And so basically the lesson here is that we really have to educate ourselves about these graspings at reality, and then, see how can we counteract those graspings. And as, again, Khensur Rinpoche quoted another quote, I believe it is by Shantideva in his Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where it says, if we don't really recognize or can identify that which is imputed, the fabricated nature of things, then we will not understand the absence of that fabrication. But first, we have to understand what are we fabricating, what is being fabricated. If we don't understand that, then we don't understand the absence of the fabrication because, we are blinded. Yeah. So the reason why we get attached to attractive things, attractive people, and how we really dislike and hate and get annoyed by what we think is annoying people, or what we call the repulsive nature of things, is just because ignorance exists intact. Okay, because of that. So we need to uproot the ignorance. No.
Anche Tenzin Devaran Jong, Shepe, now is Temuk Mumba Sessions, the Tony Toy is a Yerota, Ranchage Madubala, Ranchage Tuba, Ranchage Maduba, Toy, 아니 뒤 가르치기 어렵잖아. 댄지가 통해. 아니 가서 나공도 붙이기나 잘라간 게 통 말아봐. 아니 시랍게 나와 중네. 시랍게 나와서는 때문에 뭐 봐봐. 세기도 땅아서 제 강과 나공쟁이나 자 통계가 봐봐. 희마지 밥에는 통계도 어때는 시랍비 다 좀했어 이런 가지고 나왜 좀해. 나왜 좀해 잡지 쟤네다 뭐바세 신선도와 시랍지 몇개 오고 시럽지 몇개 오버 남지 오니 매반이 통화 뒤태 아니 내미 세도와 내미발 대 대인도자 시단다 시단다 몇교 시송기 어다 대파도 제버리 가르송기였다 딱지 나바도 되네마 가르송기였다 잡이 유다 그때 버리신도 가야 안디 오더를 그때 보도가 어다 간제 시럽기 대코나니 통이 시럽기 나와디에 제베 아니 그 오버남지 통하는 통화 뒤에 아 텔레 템베 아니 그게 되게 여자 잡에 용거 말에 시당 잡에 용거 말에 다가 나신지 가리 이내 면에 다디 야 양타보 통화 인자 야 코발이야 드베 차견더부터 탐부터 지기도 안돼 차견더부터 야 탐 용거 요아레 여자 가르스는 내라다 니 넘버 똑바 대달은 여자 시단 잡아라 여자 시단 잡아라 오래다 내 매베 대니 여자 시단 잡아라 미쇼 미쇼 시송신 와다 되게 양당 통해 넘버 2 해야 되게 인데바티 좀 받는 게 만들었던지 와다가이
So now you ask how seeing the real you are set free. How is that possible? So then on page 210, the same second paragraph, somewhere in the middle, it reads, when the illumination of the knowledge of dependent arising clears away the darkness of delusion and the eye of wisdom sees the absence of essence in things, then there is no foundation for the other afflictions and attachment and hostility do not develop, unquote. So that explains, if we see the reality as it is, then we could free ourselves. Okay, as Khensur Rinpoche has explained, that if we understand the dependent arising of emptiness, shunyata as it is, if we are able to access, the ultimate reality of things as it is, then we gain the eye of wisdom, isn't it? So when our eye of wisdom opens, now we see reality as it is, and then that will change our whole perceptions and whole life experiences, isn't it? It's just like, if we walk straight into a dark room, but there could be so many beautiful things exist, we don't see anything. When we switch on the light, the darkness is dispelled, and now we see, oh, cool, right? I see this. Yeah. So really, cultivating wisdom is switching on the light. It's the light of wisdom. When we switch on, then the darkness of ignorance is dispelled, it is eliminated. So therefore, now we are not really kind of stumbling in the darkness. Now we see the nature of things as it is, and then that will help us to counteract our afflictive emotions. Then we will be able to subdue our attachment, and hostility and all other delusions.
디세다 다 죽이나 맨나다 말 링보에도 다 계속 신세라와라 다 디스기어다 다wen도 전에 롱디 투모 많이 봐 디디치는 롱디 투모 많이 봐 다니 먹은 남지 안 되네 내야 네 대화 찍려야 다디 투모 많이 봐 찍려야 아니 야랑을 추지 담이 또 무슨 선에 되게 뭐 야랑을 추지 담이 무슨 또배 또 녀에 잡아서 또배 잡아서 니어리 있다 야 이제 가시 또 녀에 잡아자 그래서마도 또배 잡았으니 자야 말이 센트리 순간 여러 봐 어디 딘담을 리스타 딘담을 발리 용기 살때 희송신 세다다 어다 티슈다리
So with that, we have, really dealt with Prasangiga Madhyamikin's unique perspective on understanding system of delusions, afflictive emotions. Okay. Now we move into another point, which is, that Sharvakas and Pratika Buddhas, or hearers and solitary realizers, even they are capable of, realizing or understanding selflessness of phenomena. Okay, so that's the point, important point, which we will discuss.
다들 가시하기 양책 남바트 저 뒤가르사
No.
권장도 분한도 연애 야 나로지
No.
까마팅이스도 나로지
No.
아니 교토야 된데 민족나 대령 기히 망고 피디어래 뒤도네 봐야 아 간제 갈래 나게리 아니 배 근데 선자 아니야 편랍 쳐야래 근데 권장난게 있는 나로지
So we just kind of preview that, another major outline, how Shravakas and Paticca Buddhas are also capable of realizing selflessness of phenomena. Okay, to be continued, right? That's what I should be saying. And Khensur Rinpoche says that now we would like to yield the floor for you to maybe ask your questions or make observations. And so he said, he always does his best to be able to provide you his best understanding answers. Maybe, but today we have added kind of dimension that we have an array of great geishas lined up here. So he said, maybe you should take advantage of them. If he doesn't have the answer, maybe they do. Yeah. So don't be shy. So please, deep.
Reading different articles about shunyata and emptiness.
Right.
One phrase came up, I'm sure a lot of people have heard it before. The moment the wave became enlightened was when it realized it was just water.
Mm-hmm.
How does that connect with the understanding of independent arising or selfishness?
Okay,
How
maybe
does
you
that
need.
fit in with that?
Could you maybe explain a little bit more? Even I didn't understand what you said.
Okay.
What was this water thing to do with? Maybe you can.
Well, the wave the moment the wave realized it was enlightened was when it became enlightened was when it realized it was only water. In other words, it isn't wave different from what it was, what it's made up of.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of put itself above it. That's how I'm understanding the phrase that I read on this article.
Let's see.
So I didn't know whether if you could explain if you feel you're independent, but you realize you really are part of what is making you who you are. I want to understand a little more clearly on independent arising. Does that make sense?
Dependent arising?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, dependent arising.
Yeah. 자 모레 티바드다 표현 아주 휴가고서 아주 모레디 캔사 쉬슬라우드. 메기 디르와 캔서 놈제 다든데 좀디 담만데 로드 멘도. 동반이 꼴이야다 담만데 로드 기저와. 저저방에 지제직 팀들하고 상부도다 거라 주지 랍다체로와. 다 고라선은 일라고 답변나 간조이나 상계배 소리 제비나. 그러와. 시대 관아서 디스고도다 저자디 구지심도 표현나 주는데 구지 맵셔도 가서 오다 간제 가서다 출시면 라버다 지금 가서 라블 야신 베스 나와 세고서와 발라비요 봐 그러면지 나 가서 시대 강이야 직시대 수서 트레이딩에 버서 와다 다 트레이서 와 직시대 트레이버데 야 랑게티베 트레이만 데 라블 야 땡지 야 트레이데 버서 와
레바레바
시대 관아 시대 갈다 단다 다 쪼데 디임다 캔서로 뭐지 가르서 걸 땡데세 고된셔로 와 어디 직대스 마스 룩스 나로나서 와 땡데 고된셔로 와 Yeah. Even I have a difficult understanding, translating that whole wave thing into Tibetan, that concept. So he's just like, okay, let me see. Yeah. No, that's I said, you read somewhere, yeah.
That's the idea. That is, I can't human like any because jumping the song to 10 days to come. Song Joba Yapu to 10 days on the spoon, 10 days at the net, Chabuch Chavi. 10 days I get taking with the Takas, send the day again, some patas do some patas, I get take it to 10 days to journey in the Taku curry panto, 10 days in the panto with those. Hiragia with those. Carisana and take 10 days on the Derby. Ten Druba. Pentu Patu Kurza, Jujan, 10 Druba. 10 Druba. I think do much it in the 10 Druba. And Jujan and Jujan, 10 Druba. Titi, how go you do? Tita Kayon do, Suchilla Tuba maybe Ramaki, Zimbin the Batella, no younger. Suchilla Tuba maybe Ramaki, take Party, Karsorda. 탁당 좀 피네 줍대부터 가서 나와나지 나도 통되게 알아 봐. 그 노용 거 알아. 또 겉되버리 꼭 가르쳐는데 톡바 그 야제도 맞으면 식도 알아. 수득도 되베 라마티 두바티 식도 되발라. 야제 캐나 가서 야제 식는 톡박해 그래. 야제게 딘데 식도 발라. 다디 라원 딘땡게 또도 딘땡게 톡바달라 뇌세네. 어디 다 땡데스니티 다좀 되게 토마 땡데 송우주데 얘네 참부집 차비요 돼. 얘네 상당히 로로 기브를 맞던 야 예주 용경 다 시부시주 유지를 되네. 다 로로부터 시비니.
So Khensur Rinpoche, of course, we're not familiar with that expression you use about, right? But what he's really trying to do is just to explain, how do we understand dependent arising, in Buddhism. And of course, we have only talked a little bit, and he said, those who know a lot more, probably they can actually elucidate it even further and more. The English term dependent arising is the translation of the Tibetan word Tendel. Right? Ten means to depend, Del means to arise, which, of course, the Tibetan term is a translation of the Sanskrit word Pratit Samutpat. Okay? So what does dependent arising tell us is that, what does dependent mean? It could be understood at least in two different ways based upon what Khensur said. One is that dependent in terms of cause and effect relationship. Right? Cause and effect relationship, dependent. How the effect is dependent on cause, and cause is also dependent on effect. Okay? And that notion of dependent arising can explain what we call produced phenomena. Okay? Most of the things, produced phenomena, they exist dependently, or they are dependent arising because of that cause and effect relationship. Right? Because a cause, an effect cannot arise without the cause, and cause could not exist if it couldn't produce an effect. Right? So that's the one understanding. The another understanding of dependent is in terms of relativity, how things exist in relationship to one another. So this notion of dependent arising is actually broader because it includes everything that exists. Just like Khensur did not give this example, but my first footnote gives when we talk about tall and short, right? So we can only talk about something is short in relation to something that's tall, and vice versa, isn't it? So it's the relativity. Something this exists because of that exists because of this, right? It's not a cause and effect relationship, but it is relativity. So that notion of dependent arising includes both produced and unproduced phenomena. Okay. So he said, the idea of dependent arising is so crucial important that it has been is illustrated in many ways, and he thought, what he has done, explained, may not have done justice yet. There could be many other ways to understand it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yes. Oh, what kind of dependent arising? Okay. Okay, sure. Then this the condition the Dambu Koran to Chenasa, Kesrumje, Lenamadi. That condition the did it what that Nanganzo Shiram Yimbuna Yorwa. Shiram Yimbunalia, Migme now, Mename Chemes Mujorwa. So the Odi may say that 10 days, 10 days couldn't carry each other, 10 days couldn't give in a row, that make me now not like a row, or did 10 days couldn't condense in a decision or nasa.
디샴마 통용 그래. 각자를 통담기 켜버 자러와 찍혀야 그래. 각자를 통담기 켜버 맞아러 이 해야지 알아봐. 돈도 각자를 통담기 켜버 자는 총변이 이래상지. 풍봉하고 공을 가르쳐 버렸잖아. 풍봉하고 대다지 않아. 진짜 똥반 넘바 양딱 걸 지수. 그래. 지수 따오 있는 세인다. 간제 풍봉하고 나도 풍봉하고 대다지 나 대가 나신기다. 믹대랑 hinji tuba tinte tempa tuba tinte yo mare nawaye yo mare ani pe sungni che phalam yala jeji phatu tinte suya ti sungni namjeji phatu suya ga tinte ta ko 두잘 되게 송샬 지리도 시디발라 대존도 다 텐델 갈때나 텐도 매세요 근데 술도 도바티 매세요 나저기 나와나 히 술도 도바티 요 말해서 때는 좀 맞다 술도 도바티 요 말해서 겨다 근데 좀 매도다
Perhaps what you just asked might also come up later in this section, but what he wants to say at this point is in the Heart Sutra, where we encounter expressions such as no nose, no ears, no eyes, and all of those things. The way we understand that is, when we look at what has preceded this, somewhere there is a statement, as Khensur quoted from his memory, it goes something like, it is in this way that we should understand that all the five aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence or reality, right? Then somewhere it says no eye, no ear, no nose, like that. Okay? So what this really means is not so much the eyes and nose and things that conventionally exist, but it really means is the intrinsic eyes, intrinsically existent nose, intrinsically existent ears, there is no such existence. So that's the way we should understand. I think the qualifying term, intrinsic, has been left out because it is kind of understood based upon the preceding line. So therefore, it simply says no eye, no nose, no tongue, no all of that. Right? So I think that adjective the qualifying term has to be added to that. So which means there is no intrinsically existent nose, no intrinsically existent eyes, and all of that. That's the way to understand. Yeah. Marian, yeah.
So those entities like Tsongkhapa that exist in emptiness now, I presume he does exist in emptiness.
Who does exist?
Tsongkhapa.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How does he exist? Is he like an energy form? I mean, I presume that. I mean, how? Because there's an awful lot in emptiness. I have an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say he's the emanation of Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri and all these sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
He was like kind of energy.
Energy,
I guess.
okay.
I guess that's what we should think we are.
Okay.
Because the thing that goes from body to body to body is some sort of an energy that's got all these imprints on it. But before that, you go back to where Tsongkhapa is. We must, exist. Is that like energy?
I think I understood what you're saying. Yes. The Moran Tiwashi the Dirisha, Kesanomije. That Chedam de Ranshiki Maruba Tongba Inarawa, in a Chedam de any contest near to go research or the Mora patient the Dishabro, and Tambokoma Carlos to some one, and Jeromuche, Rawazongaba. Jezongaba in a Dami Tomba Nilumi, Yato, and Kentan. In the jeans are the Kansa data. Tongba in Tombana contest near the result, that Jeromuche. Never says your wife. Then I think Nuve should near the rest, Nuba Yorwa, and I'm going to DC or what, but Jeromuche and Chijame and Tuba Slava. The Kansa made in Nuba Silvadi and Jambe and Tuba said the Jeromuche, Yandi Nuba Judith chatting and Nuve or Jerova. That the Quadiragi Samarwa, is a church of the Ranching Tomba in Arawa, in a church of the Social Modes into Gorwa, he can take second summer, that did this is young.
Tea hot hit. Garsu Sambe, Naranto get the Kakja Mache in the Ranchi do your Maris. That Ranchi do maybe not maybe the Vestana. Maris. Mata Machebe, Naranko Gitati, Penamota to be shot, Mota Temper, yes, Mota Temper to be Mota Sin Shabi, take two Bina. The Yungi or Mary. Near Mutas, Mata Machebe, say, near Muta. Yet, you did your race. Setan at your ranches to Bati, Casa Jerem Chicoran, condensate your son, then Pando Tarchingi Tibu. Karine, Java Shajatuba in a Pando Tarchingi Tibu. Or Cheta Edit Carsavata, Nazu J took your mad net your race. No, what's any carta net your later, at such a letter, Jake Madon J took your marriage. Chetan Della Carsoneta. This is the candidate to do with that. Madame Machebi, Tuji, any Coranti, Carsorta, Neti, your race. Chutanze, Madame Machebi, Tuji, Jog, Mato Chigla, and the Takdon Teche, Jogi Tevi, Yenata, Nin Mar, 주점 담는다 요아리 주다 가게기 니버 저거야 가게 니겨 다 뻔뻔히 텐지에 룩잖아 딱동 때는 저거이나 니야 자와니 비요 말와 다시니 미치나 가봐도 당고 다시미 내 독서 그러와 다시야 가르 거 락바트리 거들이 깡바트 다시 리제네 제니 파지데도 다시 라브레스 어디 나신게니 피게 딱동 때니 조당 직당 딱동 마다 마제베 편에 레준데로 속고 자지 태니 조당 직 요래 데다 마다 마제베 조당들이
In order to understand how the example you gave is Rinpoche, right? How he exists, and given that things are empty of intrinsic reality, and even in his case, he's a highly realized person who has realized what emptiness is. I think we have to really understand how conventional truth is established and how ultimate reality or truth is established, because those are two different levels of truth. When we talk about emptiness, shunyata, we are talking at a different level. It is at the level of the ultimate nature of things, the ultimate reality. When we talk about how everything else exists, Tsongkhapa exists, you exist, I exist, everybody else, we are talking at a conventional reality level. Okay? So the way conventional reality is asserted is without analysis. We just usually follow the worldly conventions, right? And we simply say, hey, who is that? Well, I'm using my name, okay? Tenzin. Okay. You know what Tenzin looks like, and that's what it is. You're not going to ask the question, Tenzin who? Which one is Tenzin, the gray hair or this, glasses, whatever, right? Then you're not going to find anybody that's called Tenzin. If you do find, then you really goof on that one. He didn't say that. But, and of course, in some schools they said Tenzin has to be findable, in some sense. He used the word Tashi, so I prefer to use my name, Tenzin. So we just simply go by the worldly conventions, that things exist by worldly conventions. We say, okay, Tsongkhapa exists as a human being, just like any of us, right? Shakyamuni Buddha, at his time, he existed like any other human being. The only difference is that he was enlightened, fully enlightened person. So he doesn't have any delusions and all of the craziness that we have. But beside that, he looked like any other human being. That's a Buddha. And everybody accepted him as such, right, teacher? Nobody said, okay, who are you really, Buddha? Tell me, right? Is that your nose or your eyes or the tongue? And, then we are not going to find anything. And according to Prasangika school, when we do that kind of ultimate analysis, we have changed the level of analysis. Now we are going into the realm of ultimate nature of things, not in the conventional realm. So we cannot find anything. Okay? So that's why I think we have to keep the two different truths at different levels, how these are established at different levels, so that we don't negate each other. Yeah. Yes. Can you give the phone? Yeah.
Am I to understand that the subsequent teaching on emptiness, on dependent arising, I should say, was something that Nagarjuna taught? That was implied that it was subsequent because it was taught by Nagarjuna. Does it all refer to the identity of dependent arising and emptiness? And if so, that means does that mean that there was no teaching on emptiness prior to Nagarjuna?
Okay.
And if this is the case, then how could the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas realize emptiness in the same way?
Quran can show the issue with the Wasta Tagidelia, Khensur Tamdi Jakshes Namara, Buddha Palida, Davanama, Re. Tadi Kasa, Tende Kasa, Chest Tempe Tende, the Tango Kumzen Karesumbarova, Chest Tempasumajova. Chest Tempasumba. So that they say this is the chest temper said the Gomboludu chest tempas Konarwa, Gomboludu. Sidi Galata Palan District and then Gomboludu Gelia and a 10-day course singing Majuma in the rivers. Gomboludu Gelia, 10-day qualification singing Majuma in the river. And did they in Bayina? And the Gomboludu Majumalia, Dakas on Yaranda, that in the Yungurwata Rangerwa, and Tony is on Gomazo Tom de Yorava, just a chest temper said the Kodendi, Tony Tango Tengen, the Gomboludu Rescue, Karasco.
어디에 단진 휴타다. 뒤 아버지 차기 미두스. 그 카쿠레샤스. 내 고조대 가리케에서나 이네 마송인데 땡데 송요아레. 지단 동이 송요 말이 땡데 제마 송인데 다 단단 공부를 그다 현다 된다고요 말이. 좀 된데기 추주 땡람 파베기 탁톡바 라부지 공부를 통도고요. 되네 마 남직절라 좀 된데기 추주 망고 송요아레. 전도 애니 피게 다다 자기 까마이 티진 꺼줍지니 내용을 되는 샴라 티진 깔좀 되는데 까마이 땅 공부로도 패네 아니 자 농아 용수 속베디 타두기 때는데 파봉야지 공부로도 차인 거라 봐 땅에 뒤 차인 거야 내 삼질 그래서 해서 제당 땡데스니 저기 마도 저라 똥이 따와지 숭숭 요아래 대코는 이 땡데 숭 요아래 디나 ngōsu shuk chān rāba tī, tā chamdi judhēnsi dōg tī, kārsa yāng thakba kārsa mātōng yé tī kōwa kō tēk tō tēndēl sēng nē, tōjī chambu kūni tēndēl sēng nē, āni pīkē tī tēndē kī nāng lē tī kōna nī kī tēndē tī tsē tō tōng nē, mā tēndē sūng bā rēs, rāba. Rī mā tō yāng gōmbol lūtū ngō lā, jī 다 가르가리 돼. 다 고주를 봐 하고 말아 봐. 내가에 요새기리 때 동이 또 요새기리 근데 왜디 이내야 뭐블로 그런 게 뭐지 제비는 때도 또니 마디 해 거야지. 다 동이 따와디 땡땡이 대 퓨니. 야 가시 동이 따와를 퓨는 중에 가시 동반이 땡을 밥게 여러지. 야 따와 따다 진좀 하도 뭐 된대 용 시비지리. 근데 땡배 세계 맨들었습니다. 다 우주는 뭐 지금 공부하지 반대 버리스. 에이 십자 다 된거지. 미 개받은 좀마도 예서든데 이게 해도 야지 민도스.
What Khensur says is that that's his explanation of what's the purpose of subsequent teaching of dependent arising, and the way he really explained it is that the subsequent meaning that in the beginning there was. Before this, I should not say beginning. Preceding to this, there was teaching on the generic understanding of dependent arising. Yes. So now this is like a particular understanding of dependent arising, the dependent arising of emptiness. And of course, we cannot say that before Nagarjuna came, nobody really understood what emptiness is or dependent arising. But the thing is that Nagarjuna has made all the special. Actually, as a matter of fact, Shakyamuni Buddha himself, right? Acknowledge that Nagarjuna would be the one who would elucidate his notion of emptiness dependent arising. Yeah? So therefore Nagarjuna get the credit for elucidating the dependent arising of emptiness in a way that nobody else was able to do it before. And so he put this special emphasis on the dependent arising of emptiness because that's the way sentient beings can liberate themselves from everything else. Not necessarily the generic understanding of dependent arising, but this particular understanding of dependent arising can help sentient beings to be free. So that's the way, the way to understand it.
Rinpoche is saying the dependent arising of emptiness. We usually hear the identity of dependent arising emptiness. It's why only of emptiness, where everything else actually, all phenomena are dependently a reason. Isn't it proper to also to say that it refers to the dependent arising in terms of concept imputation, which implies the dependent arising of emptiness? Now, I'm not very clear on that, but in saying dependent arising of emptiness, do you mean the identity of dependent arising and emptiness?
Identity?
The identity, the same. The emptiness could be understood in terms of dependent arising.
Oh, okay.
There's the identity of dependent arising and emptiness.
Yeah.
It's kind of.
Korangi tanda di tendi gorwada Khensur mujedi karso da tanda di kabla tembegi karsa tende sunga gyumjen sungbarwa da tende di kana sungada ta kasorda tongni tembe tende sungbarwa tende rwa. So Koran samdi kalda Korangi da samji di mera tamana di kabla ya 동반이기 고된데로와 텐데레스로와 디순거를 순거 말서로와 동이 고된데 텐데레스로와 텐데 고된 동이를 세저로와 가지니 디 고된을 실내기에는 만나서로와 아마
저 뒤에 용그리 동반지 동반이 속세 찍바리 동이 템베 텐데 주 고돈이야요 또 텐데 송벌 때네 동이기 고돈 주니야요 디 초그리
He also thinks that what you said. I think that may be a part of that whole explanation, where the best way to understand emptiness is in terms of dependent arising. As a matter of fact, dependent arising is the big reason why things are empty of. So that's very possible.
So basically, what is radical about this teaching is that even emptiness is dependently a reason.
Right.
Is this what?
So that they mix it, carry the Nanga of Joy, the current city, Tongban Yukora tended was that is sure because Ninja thing you was at.
Really?
Cheshamba, Tongban in the year, what a Tongban Yukora tended as
Really? That again, Hugh. Tongban 10 days in Hugh Tai. 10 days, Tongban to 10 days, Ramalu, which is there, or Mari Tongban 10 days. In Payana, Dia, Shungma, Tandang, Mangoy, or Kashi 10 days, stand Tongban Shugla. Pig Tang, Tangoya, Kashi Tongban, most stand 10 days in Yaki Koduti, Shul Tangoya, Tinda, Shung Mangoris.
No, sure. Yeah, I think that's possible that that not only all other things are empty of intrinsic existence or dependent arising. Sorry, the emptiness is also dependent arising. So that could be the understanding. But another thing Khensur says is if you look in different Buddhist literatures, the different ways is explained. Sometimes dependent arising is what is explicitly presented, but implicitly emptiness is presented. Sometimes emptiness is presented explicitly, but implicitly dependent arising is talked about. So they are really very complementary to each other in many ways. Yeah. Yeah, Rina.
Yeah,
touch it good. They don't want. Yeah. Oh, what does it mean? Okay. Well, Arabaza Nati said the Karalago Satonda. Arabaze, Tonda the Kazu.
Arapata.
No,
Nati to say. Oh, syrup Terry. Mother, Trishi Missy says in Karta. Lebam retaliate on Senata, so soon do Jakari Uvina, the Tuko Yare. Arapata, Arapata say again, Tonda, yes, Rashing Meta, Savi Yongung Rabati, Takarisana, Sanjegi, Enipigi, Jeremy Chetapina, Japea, Tuguki, Enipigi, Shalab Malubati, Yegi number 10 tani. Yegi number 10 tani, take Gumnia, so soon do Jakarina. Mother Toshi Matus, then Arapata Tungochik Trampina. So take the Paja de Jabam, got the Mata or Truata. Tene Antic Tony Lasso with Missy, Seven, Junker Yori. Mother Trishi Missy said. Lebam retaliates to Lebam rated to the Southern number Tunzoe, the Tirate, Kuzum took Namu to 10, a Dutin Bepan Chene, Chedang, that. You gave us over it to go. I mean, you do Kunji show, this is your about. The Yig to the really young Sheba, Dachamo, you did. I think ye had it to game and do Tiati, you were some game, you do the Covenal. But you developed Katuki Arapato Corret on that game. It's a dance and it is. You do number 10, to Tim Bepan Chen, rank Mother tracking me says in Tea, you are Lebam number 10, Reti number 10. Takanji so do Jakarina, what he has neighbors, Mother or Tubata, Missy Saviki, any piggy to Tim Bepan, which that Rebam Reti to the Kazaneta, you do number condition. Say your barity, the Armatel, Chedan are carried, I act on the carrier, they wish you would hit them. Arasia the carrier, fast in the sense that I mean to. Okay.
So Khensur Rinpoche says that Om Arabasa Nadi, we recognize it as the mantra of Manjushri, the wisdom Buddha or the deity. Okay. Of course, if you ask, what does Om mean, then the Ra mean, the Pa mean, right? I mean, that really requires a whole lot of explanations. If you look in the Buddhist Tantra, just the explanation of the A is the super duper letter that embodies so many things, right? I mean, there's so much to explain. And he said maybe he won't remember all the things to explain today. He will go with every word. But in a nutshell, what it really means is that how we cultivate Manjushri as our wisdom deity. Okay, so we can also see Manjushri in many different forms. And one way to get his blessing is seeing him in the form of letters, Om Arabasa Nadi form, right? So in these letters contain the wisdom, nature of Manjushri. And what together it could mean is that by cultivating this wisdom or receiving the blessing, may I be able to dispel my misconceptions and the ignorance so that I can understand things as it is. Okay, so that's in a nutshell by doing that. So that's why when we visualize Manjushri and we recite the Om Arabhaja Nadi, maybe one mala or the rosary or more, whatever the case may be, we can also do purification of our negativities. We can think of nectar, right, coming from the letters, Manjushri and the letters, and then it really fills our body, clean all of our negativities and delusions, and then we gain the wisdom. So we can do that kind of visualization to receive Manjushri's wisdom and blessings, and that's why, as he quoted the lines that relating to Manjushri practice, they say, sometimes we can see the Manjushri in the form of the wisdom gone beyond sutra, isn't it? There is the text form, or sometimes in the form of the wisdom sword, as we can see. Okay? So all of these things looks like a sword, looks like a textbook, looks like a mantra, but in reality, these are all Manjushri in different manifestations form, right? So by cultivating and seeing all these things, we can receive blessings, in the form of textbook, in the form of the wisdom sword, whatever, and get rid of our ignorance. So that's, in a nutshell, what the meaning is. Okay.
My question is about Rinpoche saying to look at the levels.
Yeah.
I heard at one point levels of reality.
Yes.
My understanding is to not look at them like that. There's no such thing as levels of reality. There may be levels of perception of reality, and then there's conventional truth, like a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. So they're just a truth, and it's like a type of phenomena, but not necessarily. Can Rinpoche clarify that?
That did the Tempani in Namsa Zidikali, Kunjab Tempa, the Tendam number zero.
No.
That they did Jawati Decha, Shambati, and maybe Jetsonga and Tony was taught the Jetsonga country showers level. Jetsonga, Tony was taught in a Jetsonga Shatan shower. That's that the Kunjab Jigdembe, Dodaj, and Kunjab Shatan, the Tendam Shatan, Kakasumara. It was Rimani was shaver one now. So the Konangi, Konata, Tebdam, logo or so the Rimba Toman of the day I call Tempani City Galapa, Tempa Mandaris, and the Tadaris mother, Toman of the Dindeke Unamansel. This is Unanasur. Tempani Namja, Tempatic Tor of the Rimbatamboni Bacher or Rimbatamoni, the Tomerage or Yana Tempacity. We will need to call the letter of Chick Chair, Wakatan, the net and the Baton, the Pinetana, the Good the Baton, the Carresco.
What did it? The tomato of Chicken, you marry. Joke take on Papa Shavan of Chicken, joke the man, take on poverty, to them the batar, which didn't you marry, thank you.
No, so.
Talu Tadam, Chevy United, the Yoravata, Carsorata, Lo, Dramata, YouTube, Carsorata, Kunzop Tempata, which is Chai, in a target, Rani, tiny Juji, Tamachi Aravat. Tani Juji, Tamati, Tani Juji, Taman, or any Yuba, Yuba, Tell Kunzop Tempa, Tani. Taduk Juji in the thing, I don't master Kakjati, Tani. That Taduk thing should count the kind and over look Taduk, Tena Mato, Cheki, T, Tawani, Tani Juji, Tangi, Dikimidu, Tani Juji, Tame, Nieton Kanshik, Tani Juji, Tamarana, Tamarasoma, T. Tondam de Betting, Loyin Joktan, Tani, Nishago, Mother Tomeo, Maris.
So Khensur just says that, sometimes how, in the textbook or in translation, we say, when we talk about the two truths, we say there are two levels of truth, right? There's a conventional level truth, then there's ultimate level. Looks like one stacked on top of other, but that's not what it is. So it's more like the way you thought about. It's at the perceptual level. It's not like the one of the truth is higher and the one of the truth is below the level. It's not that. Just like he was trying to demonstrate, like if we have a cup on the table, it's not like, one is below, is one on the top. It's not that. So it's looking, probably, I think the levels could be understood in terms of the aspects of phenomena. So from one perceptual point of view, there is the conventional reality. And that reality is established by what we call valid cognitions, which manage the conventional nature of things, right? And the ultimate reality is established by the valid cognitions, which does ultimate analysis. Yeah? So it is really looking at, from perceptual point of view, as you said. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we will leave there today, right? Yeah.
Oh, that can't you but that on to can't you but that challenge like table, Chijan, cutting down Rashu, any carrying go. What I may be J to Lansan, J to do. What also genius of it, then down the walk, Cabra Cheton, Losan, by Nimborem to say show.
So the next is a Tungman jump to share in the year.
Oh, sure.
And then, set out here. All the Tungman jump to the day. Namju de Karsa, teacher than the dimension goes to the Cathy sing is the one. Maybe Chula Mendo di Tonga, Alan McConnell, Sapasan Tongduan, they to make Jamjinaronasa. That then a Pomapigate again, the Ama instead, Jill, Dentist, Moran, Nabu Yusarova, they to make Jamjinaronasa. So I have a prayer request and then I have some announcements to make before the dedication. Kathy McDonald's brother, I hope I'm saying it right, Alan McConnell passed away on Friday. So please say prayers for him and others who have passed away by then or between. Jill, how do you say the dentist? Dentist is very ill, right? So please pray for her mother, also, and other people who are in similar conditions. So we will recite Om Mani Padme Hum for them. Chadong Golo in Jebe, Yebo Long, Jendo, Geva, Sambo, Sanye, Kala, Kandu, Tela, Tedumbo, Jumba, Chendes, Chans, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme, 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 Om I have two announcements to make. Gandhin Sharsi tour monks who are here, all the venerables. So they have an event in Santa Ana from April 15 to 18, and bless you. So on April 15th, Tuesday, from 9 to 10, they will do the opening ceremony. They're creating a mandala there, actually, mandala of Arya Avalokiteshvara, Chandesi. And then on Tuesday, April 15th, the same day, 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening, Venerable K.C. Chamba Phelke will be talking about death, intermediate state Partho, and rebirth. Okay. And then April 17, 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening, he will give the four-armed Chandesik or Avalokiteshvara blessing empowerment. And then Friday, April 18, 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening, will be the dissolution of the mandala ceremony. So you're all invited to that. And so these flyer copies are in the lobbies. So you can pick up one and spread the words. That. Another announcement I have is Himalayan Festival is organized next weekend, Saturday and Sunday in Laguna Beach. So there's postcards, there are hundreds of them. So feel free to take as many as you want and give to anybody who are interested. To the extent I know, it's a debut Himalayan festival. Never happened in this part of the world, but some of them are new things. So they have a cultural dance, music, food, and vendors. And the participating countries are Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, and India. Saturday and Sunday, April 19 and 20, from 10 to 5, children and seniors are free. Entrance is $5. 650 Laguna Canyon Road. So there's a lot of postcards, so please feel free to pick up there or also in the bookstore too, okay, and spread the word. Okay, so now back to Manjushri prayer and a quick return in Tibetan and English. Lama do gombo jin jambe yang la cha ze lo kange lo de jin ye jin da yin da nam da ra sa ve jin ye dong go chi shen se che ye ju du ba de bon do kan da si be zhen ra ma re men dong dong ye ji se ve ro zo gun la bo ji da ze ye la zhu xue yang
dian so ro da ra che zhuo
ye mo ni lo le ji cha zhuo zhe ze
ma ye mi ze dong ye
今年正在 rade nan dene daje saju tase yande rinzo jase tuwe go chuta
ni jende talo mo se
jambe yangla omara bazana Amara bazana de zenden köje genra vese ye dalu demo memba rasene kada denju
lo to wa lo do pa ve na
nawa zedo zo denba nyame denjo se zanze lodo tome benjo choze dibam kara yaje zomba ba dende gele sobe bed Sanjo Nimbo Shebe Shomanze Nanda Sudin Sunje Lebre Nanda Shuje Nyamdo Shebe Bande Lame Shala Sowa Shudu Jebe Kera Ledamde Nyamda Drogun Dorwe Semje Sawa Rinye Nenjo La Shebe Losan Jade Bebe Bedo Ningma Ngaye Randa Shidebe Kivu Mise Dongwa Dikwana Geze Beze Kundo Manjushri in English. He who has the intuitive wisdom that disperses the clouds of the true obscuration, like the sun shedding a glorious light that is utterly pure. He who understands all meanings whatsoever, of perfect realization, from whose heart emerges the lotus holding the books of the perfection of wisdom. Those who live in samsara are the prisoners of ignorance, afflicted by the darkness of suffering, looking after all sentient beings with compassion. Like a mother looking after an only child, you have a melodious voice of 60 tones. Rolling like a dragon, you wake people from the sleep of conflicting emotions, freeing one from the iron shackles of karma. Dispelling the darkness of their ignorance, thus you wield the sword which cuts down the shoots of suffering. Primordially pure, having reached the 10th Bodhisattva level, the perfect body of highest qualities, the foremost son of the Buddhas, adorned with the 112 ornaments, major and minor physical perfections of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri. Please dispel the darkness of my mind. Om Arabhaja Nadi. I beseech you with the loving kindness of your omniscient light rays to completely dispel my mind, thus giving me the intellectual courage and intelligence to understand the teachings of the Buddha, their illustrating treatises and commentaries. Quick written prayer. O peerless savior and supreme teacher Shuddhodana's son, O the 17 masters and adepts, Nagarjuna and Asanga and so on, O Dibamkar as well as Sovereign Father Tsongkhapa, gloriously appear here to grant auspiciousness on the great path leading to the heart of enlightenment. You have traversed by means of the perfect threefold discipline and have enhanced ever higher the realizations of the enlightened quality. O glorious Guru, we offer our supplications at your feet. Pray written gloriously to propagate the teaching of Lobsang, by tying well the sash of monastic disciplinary precepts and generating the altruistic intention to free all beings, engage in the tantric yogas of the two stages. Think of the unbearable pain of the sentient beings who are enveloped in the forces of 5 degenerations, and to open wide the lotus grove of Buddha's teachings. May your reincarnation appear soon as a source of merit for us. Namo Mube Gajo Hundan Tangdang Tolu Wangto. Namo Dibam Kara Chung Songka Ba Dong Wung Tufu. Kong Lam Dong Chung Hedan Hedo Bantai Tukoi. Tandang Dalo Tuchi Chendang Kindang Dakai. Nade Suvi Dungim Tuka Bada Bolo. Rolai Pape Babong Tuve Bode Henchung. Dongsu Kongwin Tuchang Tintu Gosa Lele. Choma Cholai Kongwai Ruben Yabab Losang Bangsu Dachai Daikon Yiming Tintong Duwin Rolai Kotam Dubi Daikon Bakai Kunsan Tinchu Tangdai Dume không bị bão phổ cháu tàu không ngày mắng lụt nữa thuốc đại tai góng mày bán này vĩnh sinh cái này phát đái theo mai tháng sợ nén ngầm thấy thường có Khensur just said that whatever he shared today, so please try to put it into your contemplation and practice.
Semjo Rinpoche
Maje Banan Yejo Dewa Nyamba Meba Mone Gondo Beba Ejo Toni Dawa Rinpoche Maje Banan Yejo Dewa Nyamba Meba Yang
Gone Gondo Peva
Ejo Saji
Epoche Joje
Melo
Melo
Re Nije Yinde Yemba
Sanje Shindo Mende
Wewa Ye
Rogo Nargoje Lojo
Kari
Rave
Rave
Gobe
Gobe
Shengande
Shengande Mende Wa Male Jobe
Chere
Chere
Sewa
Sewa Tenzin Yazo Ye Shave Sede Bato Tenjo Ye Dan
Angora
Rana
Rana
Mandela
Rogo Niyata Oh yeah, keep on